Hello everyone, my name is James Lloyd. I am the founder of a company called the Integrated Performance Company. We do mental performance and physical optimization coaching. I formulated the company after spending about 10 years working in sports medicine, in athletic training specifically, but had always just had like a keen interest in psychology and sports psychology to be specific. So I wanted to try and merge the two together, of the mental side of things and the physical optimization, and just integrate them both, and hence the Integrated Performance Company was born.
Tell me a little bit about, in your experience, why you think the approach of integrating these things is better than how so many people in the mainstream world treat these things as isolated. You know, I see a lot of fitness coaching and then I see a lot of psychology coaching, but it's really rare that I see them merge the worlds. So it's few and far to come by to see people like yourself do that, as well as a couple other people I know. So tell me, in your experience, what do you see the result of that being, and really anything else in that type of realm of results?
As we all know, it's very heavily leaning towards the physical strength and conditioning side of coaching. There's not much on the mental side, especially after working with kids or athletes that are injured. I think if you don't at least have some sort of appreciation of the mental side of things, I think you're completely missing the point. Self-beliefs have so much that they affect everyday behavior, whether it's our values or just the way we even interpret the world. So I think that if you don't have the right mindset, regardless of the physical attributes or how much you push on the strength and conditioning side or on the physical side of things, I think it's really hard for you to fully achieve your potential, whether that's both on the field or whether it not even athletic specific in the business world too. I think it's really hard to achieve your full potential if you only lock into one half of the puzzle, essentially. Because it's this as well as I do. If you don't train the mind, then it doesn't really matter how much you train the body. You're not going to be able to crank out 100%.
It's definitely not something that you can neglect. You have to take to both of them, and just see so many people. I think specifically for athletes, and combat sports athletes is the best domain that I can see. The athletes are so fragmented is really the main word that always comes to mind. It's like you have so many different people telling you different things. So you'll be doing your classes, where you're learning your skills and you're also kind of getting some conditioning in through that. And then later in the day, if you're going to work with a strength and conditioning coach, they might have you doing more conditioning, and it's actually counterintuitive because you're running your body to the ground because they're not in line with what you just did earlier in the day. So, but the athlete doesn't know any better. They're just along for the ride. They're just like, all right, well, these people, this is a strength and conditioning coach. This is my, martial arts coach. I'm not going to tell them no. So they kind of just get pulled along with it. So for you and the people that you work with, how do you make sure that those domains, whether it be for athletes or just for regular people, are all on the same page?
In the circumstances of a fight where you've got potentially 5+ coaches all doing different things, I will typically work with someone specifically just in the mental performance domain, because they've already got 4 other people that are in the physical side. And the way I'd frame it is that I'm just there to complement their physical performance coaches, whether it's their striking coach or strength and conditioning coach, whatever it is. But if I'm working with someone as a complete person, I think my best approach is to lay out all the information on the table, let them decide the path that they want to take. It's not my job to force you to do anything that you don't want to do or that you don't believe in. I think that we can all make our best informed decision if we know both sides of the coin. I'm sure that you've seen this a lot, that typically the best route is the middle of the road, the middle of the scale, where it's not too extreme on one end of the
for sure
the scale. I was thinking while you were talking about the different coaches that can be pushing you to do more and more strength and conditioning.
Right.
I feel as though, especially in Western culture, that is the typical mindset, is that more is better. I've seen it work in high school athletics all the time. Working out for a couple of hours before school, they do more weights in the middle of the school, and then they come back after school and lift more weights, and it's 3 or 4 hours of activity a day. There's kids that I would deal with athletic training wise where their bodies are just breaking down because their parents have them in football, they're out playing AAU basketball at the weekend, and then they have bonus strength and conditioning sessions with their dad. You're a developing child who sleeps maybe 3 hours a day, eats McDonald's, doesn't hydrate, never mind doing all this.
I noticed the same thing for wrestling when I wrestled in high school. We would go from, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hour wrestling practice. And then some days, if we were slacking off in there or drained, then they'd take us into the weight room and we'd do like a circuit. And I'd be like, you're just going to get the interference effect here. You're going to get half results in both your conditioning and strength and the wrestling, because now you're completely fatigued, you're exhausted, and they expect you to just kind of go along with that culture. And I really do think that if more coaches had a well-rounded view of understanding all of those domains of, the physical, the mental, the sport itself, then the athletes would perform way better. But they get in the mindset, like you said, of the normalization that more is better. And it's just not like it really, like you said, your body is just going to be broken down. And I honestly don't know. Some of the kids that I was wrestling with had been doing that same style of routine each season since they were in middle school. So I'm like, I don't know how your body is keeping up with you. It's a ridiculous approach in my perspective. Again, you're going to suffer more than you are going to see results. It's not necessarily to blame those types of coaches. It's just an ignorance to understanding that there's so many things that contribute to making a great athlete specifically, and just more is not always better. I think recovery is a huge part of it. Actually, I'd like to hear your perspective on when it comes to the recovery aspect. How important is that? What does recovery look like to you, and what you do with your athletes or different people, whether that be rest? Is there supplements? Is there, certain types of, massage therapies or whatever that might be?
I think that Eastern medicine has been around for a long time for a reason. The way you're talking about that, I was thinking of the yin and the yang theory.
Yes.
We push a lot of the yang, just go, where it needs to be a balance of the two. That's really my approach with everything, is to try and get a nice equal balance between the two. And specifically in like the MMA space, you see a lot of these, especially the really good grapplers and wrestlers from the Russians and Dagestani areas, seem to have a bit more of like a playful approach with, especially wrestling, grappling, that they won't go 100% every single day. I know Hamzat does, but the other guys like Khabib and Islam seem to be a little more chilled out on that, rather than just trying to smash their opponent. Like, I know Sean Strickland's quite famous for that. Rob does that as well. Just they spar a day before the fight, which seems rather excessive to me. But to answer your question about recovery, I like to try different approaches with people. I think if I could recommend one thing to people, it would be really focus on sleep and have good sleep hygiene. I'll often give them like an informational sheet where I'll say, okay, no blue light after this time. Make sure that you do this. You might stay hydrated. Make sure you eat X amount of time before you go to sleep. Make sure the room is this temperature, so on and so forth. I like to have athletes try and wear wearables like watches like this as a Garmin, or a Fitbit, something like that, where I think it gives you a bit of an idea of, oh, my HRV was really low last night, must be stressed, or my body must have been overworked, maybe let's take it a little bit easier the next day. If I could recommend one thing, it would be sleep. And then based on your wearables, the data, I would tailor sessions, or I could give that information to a coach, especially like in a fight camp. Some of the things I like to try and push just for general health is cold exposure. If you have access to an ice bath, perfect. If not, even just like, I don't have an ice bath at home, but every single morning when I get in the shower, I just turn it on cold, first 30 seconds to a minute. It doesn't have to be the whole 5 minutes you're in the shower. It's that shock effect, just to get the system rolling, get that adrenaline pumping. I feel as though I don't do that, my alertness and energy isn't as high and stable as days when I do it, if that makes sense. But there's other benefits of it too, just immune response. I don't think I've been sick at all actually since I started doing that just over a year ago. So
again, like, just if you look at, and it's specifically like MMA culture, like fight culture, those types of things, like they really are so neglected for the fighters, and the recovery is just not viewed as like you're viewed essentially as like a weak link if you are focusing on that. Like Misha Tate, like former UFC champion, I see her all the time speaking on how important recovery is and how beat up her body was after her career, and that there's more important things than the sport. And you can be great at your sport, you can succeed, but what is that worth if you're done with your sport and you have the inability to get up out of bed because your body is so beat down and you didn't take care of it? I'm wondering what you think. How do we as a community go about approaching the social norm of ignoring the need for addressing that it's not just, the status quo of like, we're just gonna keep, beating our bodies down, and you did conditioning in your kickboxing session this morning? Well, I don't care, we're gonna have some hard rounds in jiu-jitsu in the evening too. And what approach can we take or do to move the masses of these gyms and coaches to make a difference and show that these athletes need balance and communication between these different domains?
Ooh, that's a good question. Because I know there are high-profile advocates out there. Like, I know LeBron spends a ton of money every single year on recovery. I actually just recently read a book called Do Hard Things by Steve Magnus. This is the hard case cover. It talks about essentially what we're talking about is that the current culture ever since, I don't know if you've seen this ESPN movie, it's called The Junction Boys.
I haven't, but I'll put it on my list to watch. Yeah.
I believe that it was, I think, a coach called Bear Bryant who was at Texas A&M, I want to say in the 50s, and his summer training camp before football started. These boys out to West Texas and essentially grill them, beat them up, and just to try and see who's the survivor of the fittest, essentially, keeping them on the team who's mentally tough, in the old-fashioned regard. And it talks about how things like scenarios like that and movies amplify that sort of energy and make that popular, just being head down, grit your teeth, keep pushing through regardless. Whereas this book actually talks about what genuine mental toughness is. And I think if you reframe or just use a synonym for toughness as reframe to durable, I think that changed a lot of people's perspectives on what actual mental toughness is. And without spoiler alert, but just to summarize the book, it talks a lot about, in tough situations, taking time to take a breath, analyze the situation for what it is, and then making the correct call on the course of action from there. And sometimes that means to turn around and try a different way to try and achieve the goal. It doesn't mean just head down and push through. And that's genuinely what mental toughness is. But to answer your question about how we can change the culture, I think it's just, I've noticed working with younger coaches that I would say 40 and below, that they are a lot more cognizant of the big picture. As time goes along, I think that shift is going to gradually become the mainstay. I don't think that, especially coaches where they have athletes with these chronic recurring injuries, and I think with the birth of AI and the internet, where you can just look up why does Thor keep getting this hamstring injury over and over again, and you can punch in your strength and conditioning sessions or working out a week, then ChatGPT is going to spit out, maybe you should not do that as much, or you should on these things instead. So I would imagine that we would see a big shift in the next 5 to 10 years of being a little bit more holistic with our approach and focus on recovery and the importance of that, because especially in some cultures it's still very much a head down, grit it out, try and push through at all costs, whereas I think that we're starting to slowly see it, and it's just going to take I would imagine what would move the needle a little bit quicker would be high profile athletes coming out and talking. I really love what the UFC does with their embedded series, where they'll follow the fighters around on the fight week and you get to see all the different things that they do, and a lot of the time they are doing saunas, cold plunges, massages, whatever it is, just try and help get their mind right, get their body right. And I think just little steps like that will eventually turn into an avalanche snowball effect.
I agree. I think the more that it's seen and discussed, the more that those things will eventually and inevitably change. So the more that for the recovery or the you don't have to go balls to the walls all the time approach gets talked about, then it'll cycle through people's attention and be a more prominent and respected perspective. Because right now, I agree with you. I think the David Goggins, just keep going, just tough it out. It really is just so unhealthy. It should be about health, which is, it sounds funny because I'm talking about fighting, but I feel like you get into these sports and these interests because deep down you have some form of passion for health, whether that be protecting yourself or, taking care of your body and staying fit. I think it needs to be more normalized that this is for positive. I don't know if you've ever ever read, I think the book's called Letting Go by David Hawkins, I think. He talks about in the book switching the words, the type of words you use to describe what you're doing. So instead of I'm going to push through this workout because I don't want to be fat, let's say, like I don't want to be obese. You're going to say, I want to push through this workout because I want to take care of my body. It's an affirmation rather than, devaluing or a negative frame to what you're doing. And I think the large scale frame for lots of athletes and just people in fitness in general right now is it's negative. There's a negative approach of like, you got to do this or else you're that bad thing if you don't do this, as opposed to like, wow, look at that person doing this thing to take care of themselves or to have this positive, outlook on life or whatever that might be. Yeah. So, but I wanted to know more about what athletes do you have that come from, or not even just athletes. I really want to know people in general as well that come from the typical background of I'm working with all these different coaches. I just don't know what to do. It's all over the place sort of approach. And do they have relief when they come to you? Is there, what's their experience? Just some anecdotal, like your own observations of the differences in the approach of doing things the traditional fragmented old school way and then the new approach that me and you both believe in.
The vast majority of the work that I do is mental performance based. Take a look within inside yourself. The answers are always there. Just especially again in Western world, we don't take our time to sit in silence, listen to that voice or listen to that gut feeling. Slight tangent. There's a great book by Patrick McKeown called The Oxygen. This is a huge piece of both physical and mental performance that has been in everything that we do. Essentially, if I could summarize, it would be nasal breathing only at all times, whether that is at rest, sleeping, or while you're doing vigorous activity. So we have shifted due to environmental demands, due to just stress in general, from nasal breathing to mouth breathing, because the body during even just like low level under the surface stress will switch to a sympathetic nervous system response, which is mouth. But the book talks about how the effects of mouth breathing lead to certain chronic illnesses and disease and a decrease in performance. Whereas if you switch to nasal breathing, which is the way that we're supposed to breathe, it talks about how it stimulates the parasympathetic nervous response, which is the rest and digest. It lowers down heart rate, increases the blood delivery to the muscles, it helps to reduce blood pressure, so on and so forth. And that's the way that we're supposed to breathe. But I can talk about that at a different time, a little bit later. So back to what we're talking about, my approach to athletes that come to me who are a little bit confused or they don't really know what to do, because it's like on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, it's experts in the field that are telling you to do one thing on the end of the scale and someone else says do another thing. Me and my wife actually noticed that a lot when we were preparing for our first child. We were trying to figure out what to do for sleep training, or whether we'll have the kiddo in the bed with us or not. And then those experts, the main focus that I begin with is just having awareness of the internal environment. What I mean by that is having time periodically throughout the day where you sit, close your eyes in a quiet environment and breathe, and just see what your body's telling you, whether it's mentally, whether it's from the gut, whether do I hold tension in my body, where is this coming from, what is this information telling me. And a lot of the time all the time people have the answers inside them. They know what their beliefs and values are as to which path they need to go down. If I could summarize it, it would be to really focus on introspection, and I just essentially hold the space for the athlete. I act as their mirror in front of them and just help guide them to the answer that they need to get to. If it's a specific question, like I'm getting conflicting advice, a specific strength and conditioning protocol, or whether it's like diet related, I'll just point them to specific people that I trust online, or whether it's websites, and give them, if they want my opinion, I'll give my opinion, but I just essentially guide them in the right direction as to what I think would be most beneficial for them, and let them decide what's best for me. Because especially like things with nutrition or sleep, you can't believe anything that the mainstream media tell you, because it's
definitely not
a little bit of digging below the surface. Who is financing this commercial? Especially for athletes that I work with that have even just like simple confidence issues. It's like they'll go to their PCP and they're like, oh, sounds like you have anxiety, here's a pill, go take a pill.
What do you see with those, how do they respond to the more holistic approach? Because I'm 100% on the same page as you. I think there's so much misinformation, whether you're scrolling on Instagram or whether you're watching mainstream media about like, this is the standards for health, and it's like, really? Because we don't look that healthy when we're following them. So
like the teenage or young 20s athletes, like I can understand it a bit more that they don't have any awareness. But when the parents are like in their 40s and they're like blown, when you're like, oh, you don't actually have to take a pill for this. There are various mental exercises you can do. You can even just get in sunlight in the morning. There's a post on my Instagram a couple of months ago about for the daily life, where the first half an hour of your morning dedicate to 5 things, whether it's getting sunlight, cold exposure, setting intentions for the day, breathing, and then setting that frequency to begin the day, and then letting the day succeed for you as however you imagine it for the day. The typical reaction is from younger athletes, of course, they don't know any better, so I'm not expecting, but when I talk to their parents or older people, usually like blindsided, because all the information they've been fed is just take this pill, like you don't need to do, just go down this very narrow niche pharmaceutical route, or every problem that you have requires like formal therapy. And that's a big thing that I would distinguish between mental performance coaching and therapy, is that coaching is all about getting results. I'm not trying to diagnose you with any sort of disorder or any label it as trauma or anything like that. We may touch upon it or it may come up, but we're not focusing on that. We're purely focusing on giving you techniques or allowing you to work through whatever energy or memory is stuck in your timeline so far, so we can push past it and then make better decisions, whether that's in the athletic field or even just in the business world from then on.
Yeah, it's more tailored to as it says in the name, more tailored to the performance of it rather than whatever might be affecting them from their past. I think that there might be a space in the future where some of those types of practices can actually help the athletes more. There's a type of therapy that I know of. I don't think it's very well known. It's called holographic memory reconsolidation, I believe, HMR. What it does is sitting in a session and you are using the frequency of color you assess your body, you see where it's speaking to you. So you could have, let's say, chronic pain in your neck or something. So you assess and you have pain in your neck, and you're going to go through describing, well, what does the pain in your neck, what's it shaped like? Does it feel like? What's the texture? What's the temperature? And you're going to describe it, and you're going to see essentially what that pain looks like. And you're going to ask yourself, okay, well, where have you felt this pain before? How old were you? So you get taken back to that memory, but not in a way that traditional talk therapy would take you back there and reconnect the neural pathway to make it stronger. What you're going to do is you step into that part of your memory long enough to where you understand why that pain is stored there or why it's coming up. And it could be from a certain type of memory. Let's say, in an extreme case, maybe you describe, oh, well, the pain I have it's kind of round and, it's tan, and the shape that you're kind of describing kind of looks like a hand. And then maybe, you get taken back to, oh, I think I was maybe 5 years old when I had this. And the memory that comes up is your dad slapped you on the neck or something for misbehaving. So that comes up, and then you can reframe in that memory. So say, what do you want to happen differently? Maybe you go back, maybe you rescue yourself, and you lock it in with the frequency of color, breathing that color through your body and re-anchoring it. And I believe that type of reframing strategy, going back to something like that, which I guess would be deemed more of like a less performance style, but it could be put in a performance category, but it's deemed more therapy style approach. I think the Cardinals, I forget what baseball team, what state that is, but I think the Cardinals had a coach who did that, and I think they either made it to a championship game that year or won the championship as long as they had that coach going on. So I do think that it's so cool to see so many different modalities and approaches in all these different domains get taken in, because everybody has their 2 cents to put in, and sometimes it's garbage. Like you said, you'll be scrolling and you'll be like looking at some guy talking about every day 100 burpees, 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, and you'll be in fight shape, and I'm like, that's probably not the first approach I'd use.
I see it all the time on Instagram with coaches trying to coach other coaches. It's funny, it's like, oh, I went from making $1,000 a month to $250,000 a month in 6 months. I was like, this is absolute bullshit.
Yeah, exactly.
Or like people that post on the page like, oh, now an 8-figure coach. I'm like, I feel as though if you're making 8 figures, like you don't even need to like promote that. Like,
so if you had one thing, one approach, one key piece of information that you would want to give to any athlete or any human being in general about this type of approach? Anything that you think will really wake them up, open their eyes to this is a new way, we're going to unite these different worlds of body and mind, make a holistic health approach for these athletes and people, what thing would you say?
Going back to what we were talking about earlier about introspection and then having a good emotional IQ would be the number one priority for me. If you can think back, like your thoughts will lead to certain feelings that you have, and then those feelings will then inspire into certain physiological changes, whether it's an increase in heart rate or blood pressure or muscle tension, and of course then that affects your physical performance. But I think having a good mindset and having skills in place to, whether it's on a daily basis, like having daily reps to try and bring yourself or give you a good emotional IQ base, or just daily practices that allow you to just check in with yourself and be like, what's my body or mind trying to tell me today? Where is this going? Where is this coming from? And then trying to necessarily diffuse, but sometimes accept and acknowledge, sometimes divert the path, just so it doesn't escalate and spiral from then on and affect performance. Like, I would say that has, on a personal note, has been transformative to me. Just having those skills, which I didn't previously have a number of years ago, has really been really helpful, and has helped me, allow me to be more mentally tough, durable, make more informed decisions, and then I play Sunday league soccer, so it's nothing at a high level, but just allows me to play better there, or whether it's golf or something like that. Acknowledging that the voices are there in your head, the voices are always going to be there, but just acquiring skills where you can navigate those a little bit better. Acknowledge them for what they are. They're just pieces of information. Doesn't mean it needs to affect me in a negative way, but just and then move on. That would be my number one piece of advice, would be to learn skills, allow you to have good emotional intelligence, and then in the moment anxiety and in the moment stress, various breathing techniques that you can do. I've just started reading a book called EFT tapping, which is emotional freedom tapping techniques, which in Asian medicine they believe in meridians, which are essentially energy channels where energy runs throughout the body, whereas in the Western world we are very mechanical, like this muscle attaches from here to here and it's responsible for this, whereas in Asian medicine they'll believe that maybe like a trail that goes of energy that goes from here all the way down opposite hip. So what the tapping does is you may tap here on the collarbone to try and release some energy that may be stuck further down. So you have like an abdominal issue that you may tap here to try and release some of the energy that's stuck there, to allow a free passage of chi or energy. There are things like that you can do in the moment too, which really help. Especially, I don't know if you're familiar with, they use some trauma therapy, it's called EMDR. Have you heard of that before?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so one of the techniques that I use for installing self-belief systems is, to summarize it, would be to set an alarm 3 times a day. Let's say it's at 9, 12 and 3, and then say you thought that you really want to work just being good enough for yourself and good enough for your family. 3 times a day you're going to set that alarm, and then let's say at 9 o'clock you're going to sit down in a quiet environment, and then you're going to have some left and right stimulation while you repeat this new self-belief out loud. So for example, let's say I'm going to sit there, and you can either do left and right eye movements, so I can move my eyes left and right, while I say I give myself permission to be good enough, and do that for a period of 3 or 4 minutes. It doesn't have to be left and right eye movement, it can be tapping, so you can just pretend like I'm tapping my feet on the floor. I can be tapping left and right while I say, you can tap your legs left and right. So what that does, that left and right stimulation allows the 2 hemispheres of the brain to connect with each other, and the stress response, fight and flight center in the brain, the amygdala, actually reduces in its sensitivity whenever you do left and right stimulation. So essentially, come to terms with the trauma that you've been through. Let's say that you've witnessed somebody be murdered, or that you'll go back into the memory, and what that left and right stimulation does is it helps almost like strip away that emotion from the memory. You can see it more objective, whereas if you've been through any sort of trauma therapy, that emotion, that charge is still really high, and that's what you're struggling with essentially. That's why you go into therapy, is because the actual charge is still there and it's affecting you in day-to-day. In summary, the reason why they do that in the MDR is try and strip away that emotion and see that memory for what it is, and allow you to process. So I took that theory, which I first read in a book called The Body Keeps the Score. Would be a great book. Free book, top free book I would recommend for people. Great book. Those of you that don't know, it talks about how, sort of similar to what we were talking about earlier, about how thoughts and feelings will manifest itself in the body. So a lot of the time, people that have chronic health issues, let's say Crohn's disease or something like that, a lot of the time that actually is a result of you holding on to stored stored emotion that you haven't processed yet. So this book talks about PTSD, talks about chronic health issues, and how adopting a holistic approach actually helped to treat, reverse, whatever you want to call it, heal a lot of these chronic health issues.
I find it so fascinating with athletes specifically to take those sorts of approaches because, like, I understand, like, for anybody watching who would, like, hear some of the stuff we're talking about, like, you're breathing in color frequency or you're tapping your feet. Like, I understand how it sounds, but it's true. Like, I understand you're rarely going to see it in your traditional modern medicine, but they can't make money that way. If you teach somebody that all the resources are already with them, then you don't have to pay the traditional healthcare systems to take care of you.
Simple things like breath work aren't taught because you can't charge somebody to breathe.
Exactly. It's in everything. You're going to need to know how to breathe for the sport you're in. You're equally going to need to know how to breathe just to go through your life, to have a better experience, day to day. But like you said, you can't charge people to do that. The thoughts people have, you can't charge them or keep track of the things they're thinking, but the small things like that are super important, and it's hugely underrated. It really is. I think this is why it's so important that we have conversations like this and put stuff out like this, because the body and the mind, they're in sync all the time. It's not either or, but so many people are like, what are we going to do today? We're going to focus just on your mental health, as if your mental health doesn't also coincide with your physical health, and your physical health doesn't coincide with your mental health. Both of them are constantly impacting each other, so it makes no sense to just focus on one thing and just take an approach of like, I'm just going to focus on my mental health, but you're not taking care of your body, you're not eating well, you're not sleeping well. No wonder your mental health sucks, is because you're not taking care of something that responds or partners with that.
I would even go as far as saying like the mental side of it is arguably more important than the physical. If you were to neglect the mental side for folks who are athletes that listen to this, I would say that, let's say you're a soccer player, or say you play football, by you neglecting the mental side of your game would be the equivalent of you just showing up to football practice, doing practice, but never actually going to the weight room, or like you said, never focusing on diet, never focusing on hydration. Like, you are neglecting a huge part, if not bigger part than you going out, you're putting those reps in. The mind is so powerful. They've done studies on just simple visualization. There's a famous study where they talk about free throws, basketball. To summarize, they have one group that shoots free throws for X amount of times every day. They have a group that does visualization only for, I think it's like 20 minutes a day, and they have a group that does both, of actually shooting the free throws and doing visualization techniques too. And the results of the study were that the first place group was group number 3 that did both visualization and free throws. They improved their free throw scores by like 10 or 15%, which is huge in basketball. The free throws only and the visualization only were actually very comparable between the two. So the mind is incredibly powerful, and I think that if you neglect the mental side of your game, then you're arguably missing out on 60% of your overall performance.
Addressing both as much as we can at all times, and just think people and we need to let our walls down when literally between the different domains, but also in our approach to that sort of thing. And there's so many people that are just super stuck in their ways. I can understand, maybe that did work if you're speaking to a coach, maybe that did work for you in your whole career, but that doesn't mean that there's not a better alternative now. If we always just took that approach of, oh, well, this has worked for me, then we would never advance as a society. Whatever sport you're in, whatever food you're eating, whatever weight you're lifting, whatever conditioning you're doing, whatever breathing you're doing, all of these things affect each other. They're not isolated parts. They're not individual.
Yeah, they're all in symbiosis with one another. One thing affects the other. If you eat McDonald's every day, your body's going to break down. If you take care of this, your body's going to keep the score, and it's going to break down.
It still blows my mind how foreign it is to people, and even athletes specifically, with just, like you said, the lack of introspection. A lot of athletes or fighters that I know cannot tell me why they're in the sport they're in. It's a domino effect, but people have no ability to see that in themselves, and then it's equally as shocking to them when I tell them things like, yeah, dude, you probably have stored emotion in your body that you haven't processed, and it's manifesting into injuries. If you want to perform better, you have to live better. Your health and your life, you can't just go into the gym every day and just push and not be recovering and not taking care of yourself and looking after your thoughts and being introspective, like you said. If you have a reoccurring injury as an athlete, who knows? It could be manifested from emotional stuff. I've seen stuff about the symbolism of how your body will try to speak to you. You have an ankle injury reoccurring, maybe you don't feel supported, so your body's literally telling you, hey, we don't feel supported, you need to pay attention to this, we're gonna inflame your leg leg, or we're going to irritate your muscle, like whatever, we're not going to recover as well. And athletes will literally ignore that completely and just keep pushing. And partially it's because the culture is so hell-bent on, oh, get over it, just you got to push through, you got to be tough. When you have athletes come in, I'm sure that you have conversations with them or you speak with them and you hear these types of self-talk things. Do you push towards correcting that, and how do you go about doing that and making a change in the culture by making a change in the individual?
Introspection is such a foreign concept to most people nowadays. It asks you for to close your eyes and breathe a little bit and just see what comes up. Average kiddo or athlete I work with just can't comprehend that, because they've probably never sat there with their eyes closed and looked introspectively ever before. But if an athlete's talking to me or a coach is talking to me, just started working with a girl that does hurdles. She does 300 and 400 meter hurdles, and the coach just came up to the other day and said she has the potential, but whenever she goes over a hurdle and knocks one down, it's just an escalating spiral effect from there on. So usually I'll just be curious with it and just ask the athlete questions, like if it's something they're willing to try and eradicate or work on. If it's not, I just leave them alone, because I don't want to force it on anyone, but just ask some questions about, let's say that you go over a hurdle, you knock it down, like what's the first initial thoughts and feelings that you have? Sometimes they don't have an answer. They don't know. They just try and suppress it and push on, and then all they know is that at the end of the race they're beating themselves up. The average person doesn't typically have much introspection, or they can't really follow the chain back. But ask various questions about, what do you do to prepare for an event? Do you do any visualization? Do you do any visualization afterwards? Like, let's say you make a mistake in the hurdles, do you go back and almost like analyze after the event and replay it in a constructive way of like, this time I'm going to make sure I jump off this leg when I go over and make sure my arms and legs are in this position? Or is it more of a rumination that you have of beating myself up, like, oh, I'm terrible at this, I'm not good enough? So just asking curious questions of, is this more an issue that can be worked on, and do they want to work on it, or whether is they being constructive with it? Post-performance analysis, or do they even do a post-performance analysis? It might just be something that if they're interested, I may just give them a few pointers. Try journaling, or try asking yourself these 3 or 4 specific questions after you finish your performance. If it seems to be something deeper, so this girl in particular, she struggles a lot with like perfectionism, and we went deep in on that to see where that's coming from, almost like linking the chain again, stems from these specific incidents in the past.
Right.
And then coming to terms with that, almost similar to what you were talking about earlier, actually. The technique that I use is for self-belief rewiring. I would bring you in for, we'll do like a really quick baseline questions on where you're at with finances, family, career, so on and so forth. And we'll rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. Let's say it's like something's a 3. Let's say your career is a 3. I'm going to ask you, what would a 10 out of 10 look like? If you're not coming to me with anything specific, let's say this girl, she struggled with perfectionism, say that she didn't come in with that. What we would do then is transition into the coaching session. I just want to see what comes up for you. So I'll bring you down into a close to hypnotic state. I'll say like a really deep, relaxed state through visualization and slow, deep breath work. And then I would ask you specific questions about beliefs that come up for you. And I would ask you to not filter the responses, just tell me whatever comes up first, and just remind you that you're safe in this environment, and whatever comes out is just between me and you. And then typically things will bubble up from the subconscious instantly. A lot of times just like word vomit about underlying beliefs that you have. Say that it was a perfectionism issue that you're having, we would then go a little bit deeper into that. So I'm going to ask you specific questions about, well, what I'm trying to get to is the deeper underlying cause, like specific scenarios when this has happened before. I'm really trying to charge up this emotion to a 9 out of 10. 10 out of 10, so really build it up in your body and have it fresh at the surface. Just to mention another type of therapy that isn't really mainstream, have you heard of timeline therapy before?
I wouldn't be able to tell you what it's about.
Timeline therapy works on the premise that everyone lives day to day and in the past and the future on their own timeline. So in the Western world, we believe that the past is on the left, the present's in the middle, and the future's on the right. So just like a scale. What I do is charge up that emotion of perfectionism in you, and you'll visualize, you'll see that that's how you feel in the present. And then essentially what we do is visualize pushing that emotion, that charge, pushing it all the way to the left in the past, and watching it just evaporate all the way into the past so that it's no longer affecting you, then coming back to the present in the middle, and then reframing, rewiring, changing that belief into something more positive, naming colors, naming sounds, naming emotions that are coming up with that feeling, that new belief. And similar to what you said earlier, breathing it into the body and then coming up with that rewiring self-belief mantra that I was mentioning earlier about repeating that 3 times a day. Essentially ripping out a weed or a big old tree, moving it into the past, moving it to the left, and then over the next week till the next session, we're going to be rewiring and planting that new, beautiful new belief that you have, reinstating, rewording, re-saying this new belief over and over and over again. Essentially in the body, the neurons that wire together fire together. So if you constantly repeating positive affirmations to yourself, those neurons are going to start to wire together. It takes roughly 21 days. I'm not really sure what the science is behind that, but typically 2 to 3 weeks is how long it takes for you to fully install a new belief. And then you'll notice usually within the 7 to 10 day mark that your behavior or mindset will change with previously triggering scenarios. So the girl that does the hurdles, whenever she may kick or trip over or even kick over a hurdle, those previous thoughts of I'm not good enough, I'm terrible, suck at hurdles, she'll at least have an awareness of that and then be like, oh, actually I don't feel this way anymore because I've removed this old self-belief, moved it into the past and rewired it with this new self-belief. Going back to what you were talking about earlier, it sounds like a lot of woo-woo, but it's incredibly powerful.
What do you see the athletes or people that you work with, like how do they react to that? Because that sounds like that might be really the first time in their lives where there's some true introspection. So what is that reaction like typically?
Especially when you do it in person, when you charge up that emotion before moving into the past, you'll see a physiological reaction in them, whether it's like a panic or tension or shoulders up to their ears or chest breathing, whatever it is, to signify they're in a stress response. And when you visualize moving it into the past, it's like 9 times out of 10 you'll just see a relief, like just letting go. People that if you can get them to really relax and stay calm and remember that they're safe, and this stuff all comes up and actually works really well with people if you can get them to go down to that deeper level for the first time, because it's like new uncharted territory. It's incredibly powerful if you can get them down to that deeper level for the first time, and then once they've done it for the first time they're like, oh, this actually works, like I can really buy into this. Rather than using a specific technique, it's more about gaining their trust from the athlete or individual rather than specific skills of like scan my body or having a specific skill like that. If you can get them to open up properly, that's the biggest key.
What would you say to explain why the integrated performance process is the way of the future and why we should be going about doing it this way?
I would say that the integrated performance approach, what me and you essentially do, is important because I'm just visualizing that yin and yang again. You're taking both parts of physicality, mentality, merging them together, and between the two of them, especially the mental side, you will improve health, performance, happiness, and peace. I can give you advice all day on like physical optimization stuff, but I really believe if you are mentally not necessarily strong but intelligent and you can navigate things mentally, then everything else is going to fall into place. And I think it's going to be the way forward. I hope it's going to be the way forward for us doing conversations like this, obviously, but really just having that slow ripple effect of working with everyday people and then hopefully one day working with someone that's a really prominent person, whether it's in business, politics, or sports or something like that, and just having them being the voice that moves that needle significantly across. It's incredibly key to take time for yourself, take time to slow down, sit in the silence and be comfortable with that, and then listen to that voice that's inside your body or coming from the gut, and really respecting that and letting it guide you rather than, because we've all been in situations before where we've ignored it and it's turned out to be right. And just taking care of the body doesn't need to be anything drastic like, oh, you have to follow this specific method or this specific method. Just move your body, nourish it, hydrate it, be outside in nature for X amount of time a day, breathe correctly, and then work on this. I'd make it sound very simple, but those skills are not taught in school. Like I've worked in high school for almost 10 years, and just talking to the athletes there, it's like we talk about diet. You need to increase your protein intake, and they're like, what's protein? I think, of course, for us, the integrated approach is trying to maximize and work at the elite level for athletes specifically. For the average person who's trying to improve, just do something in the right direction. It doesn't have to be specific. Take some, like I said, take some time in the silence and listen to what's coming up and use that as information. Don't judge it. Don't try and suppress whatever feelings and emotions are coming up, because what we try and suppress or reject will ultimately stick around and grow and grow and grow until the point that it comes out in a mental outburst, or going back to the body keeps score, it comes out in some sort of physical ailment. So respect the voice that comes up.
It's not traditional education. I think this type of approach should be, but I think maybe that the more that we talk about it, we can be needle movers for it to be a more normalized and mainstream popular type of knowledge base that should be taught to everybody. For anybody who's curious about how to get in contact with you and anything else you have going on, just give a little spiel real quick on how they can do that.
You can follow me on Instagram at Integrated Performance Company. I'm also on X, which is Integrated Performance Company 2, and I have a website of the same name called the integratedperformancecompany.com. You can follow me on an upcoming journey which I'm going on. I'll be supporting a guy named Matt King, who is trying to raise money for underprivileged families by riding his bike from the southern border of Mexico all the way up to the northern border with Canada. And his goal is to raise $1 million, and we'll be giving away portions of that money as we go from the southern border to the northern border. We'll be starting that journey on the 27th of May, and that is called The Ride. I'll send Thor a link to the official Instagram page for that, and I'll also send him a link to the donation website online as well, in which you can donate some money. Even if it's just $10, that's going to make a huge difference to these underprivileged families and communities that will be passing through on the way up to the northern border. So anything you can donate will be greatly appreciated.